Hi, this is Bill, and we're continuing our CSC110 orientation. In the previous video, we talked about several of these topics: expectations, syllabus and schedule, course content, course website. So we did a good job there. Let's continue now with jumping into basics of computer programming, and then we'll continue with the rest of our topics. So let me jump forward here. All right, so in this course, we're going to learn the basics of computer programming. So what is a program? What's a computer program? Well, it's a set of instructions that we give to the computer so that it does something useful for us. And that's basically the gist of it. Now, a typical computer program in its simplest form often looks something like this. You get some input, maybe you ask the user a question, or you get something from a file, or you get something from the internet, and then you do some processing. Maybe you're formatting it or calculating something, or doing some sort of useful processing, and then there's some sort of output. Either you tell the user about it, you create a report on file, a disk, you upload something to a website, but many programs have this kind of structure with these three pieces. So many of our programs will follow kind of that pattern. Now, what is programming? Well, programming is figuring out how to give those instructions. So how you plan for the program and specify the steps that the computer needs to take to solve the problem is a big piece, and then verifying the solution works properly and documenting your work so that other people who look at it, your instructor included, will understand what you were doing and how you were thinking. Now, this is a very oversimplified model here. There's a lot of modern practices that say that things go a little differently, but that's a topic for another day, so let's leave that alone. So what are some attributes of a good programmer? If you're going to become good at computer programming, what do you need to develop? What skills? Well, first of all, you need to think logically about problems. So how do you break a problem down into steps so that you can figure out how to attack it? The more complex the problem, the more thinking and planning it takes. How do you break them down into pieces? Because often a hard to solve problem can't be kept in your brain all at once. So how do you break it down into tiny pieces where you can attack chunks of it that make sense to you? Also, good knowledge of the programming language, the tool in this case, so you understand the syntax, the keywords, things like that, so that you can use them to solve your problem. And then, last but not least, lots of practice. You'll have plenty of practice in this course with labs and projects, but you'll do a lot of these in every programming course, because that's the best way to learn to program well, is to just do it, and you'll get better as you go. Now, what about the Python language? We're not going to talk all about why Python was chosen for this course, because it was, and sort of that's what you and I both arrived at. It's how we came to the party here. But Python is used for this course. It is a high-level and interpreted language. So we can use words that are easy enough for us to read, like print and if and things like that. So it's reasonably easy for humans to read. It is a language that you'll see in the real world. So as I tell people, hey, I'm going to teach a course in Python, they'll say, oh, we use that for X thing in our particular business. So it is something you might see in the real world. It's not just something that's only in schools. Also, it is fairly forgiving compared to most languages. So as a first language, it lets you do things in maybe a little bit simpler way. It's a little bit more straightforward in some ways, so that's probably a good thing for you. But that has its downsides too. Sometimes forgiving can run you into problems that you wouldn't have expected. But for this course, it's not a big deal. We'll just enjoy using Python and the things that it offers. The other good news for us is it's free. If you go to the Python website, it's very easy to download the thing, and so you'll want to get the latest one. For instance, when I downloaded it, it was 3.4.3. It's a Windows program that I got. But you go to python.org, right? www.python.org, and it's really easy. The other thing is they give you a pretty decent little tool to write programs. So we'll take a look at that in just a minute. And so that's a little bit about the Python language that we're going to be using. Now, it's Python. We're going to be using the editor that we're going to use, and the environment we're using is called the IDLE. It's the Interactive Development Environment. They obviously, worked on that to make it fit the word idle. So the IDLE is a place where you can play. The base IDLE is a play space where you can try things and see how things work, and that's great. But that's not where we're going to create our work. So we also need to be able to create files that are Python scripts. They end with a .py extension, and these are what we'll actually be using in the program. So let's take a look at the IDLE and do some playing with it, and then we'll write write our first script. So when you launch the IDLE, you're going to see something that looks very much like this. When it starts, you can type things. You see I've already been kind of playing a little bit today, but you can type things like, what's 7 times 8? And you hit enter and it'll say, oh, that's 56. Well, great. That's not a program, right? That's not something that we can submit, but it's a little play space for you to kind of try things and see how they work. And if you say, print hello CSC110, we're following Python syntax, so we say print, open paren, in apostrophes, we type our little string, our phrase, and then we close, and then we hit enter, and it says, yeah, certainly I can print that on the screen for you. So this is a play space. It is not the project space, but that's a thing that you'll find useful. What I find is often useful is if I keep this shell open, I can go and do some quick playing and trying of things as I'm working in a program. So often I put 2 windows side by side. Now if I want to create one of those files that I was talking about, how do I do it? Well, easy enough. Go to File and say New File, or do Control-N. As you probably know with computers, it's very important to save your work and make sure you know where it is. So first thing I do is say File, Save, pick a spot for it. I'll just put it on my desktop and say Hello World. And it's going to have a .py extension. So you'll notice that I have created my file. If you look on your desktop, you'll see it. And now I'm in a place where I can type a Python program, a Python script. So let's write our very first one. And we're going to, again, use Python. Let's say, we're going to say print, open parentheses, hello. So that's great. And now I've typed the program. To see if it works, I'm going to save it. I'll do Control S. And then I'm going to run it. You can run it by choosing Run and Run Module, or just press F5. Once you do that, it's going to either use the shell that's already open, or if the shell is not open, it's going to open it. So you'll notice when I did that, it said restart, and then sure enough, it did what I said and printed hello. Well, great. So let's modify our program and be a little more clever. So I'm going to come up to the top of this. I'm going to put in a comment. Comments are not executable statements. They're not intended for the program to understand. They're just for humans. So I'm going to say, this is my first Python program. Yay. Okay, so now let's look at an example where we do input and output. So I'm going to say username equals, now notice username is a word I made up, so username is set to the result of an input statement, and I'm going to give a prompt. So enter your name, colon. Right, so the input statement, the input function, you pass in a prompt, what you want to tell the user, and then it's going to take that input and it's going to store it in the place that you selected. In this case, it stores it in a little place, a variable called username. And then I can use that username, that variable, the contents of that little box in computer memory, and it's going to use that here in the print statement. So I'm going to print the word hello, and then I'm going to also print the username. Does that make sense to you? This is input and output. You're going to use the input function and the print function to do input and output in these simple programs. I save the program, and then I press F5, and it comes in and says enter your name, and I say Bill, and I press enter, and it says hello Bill. Yay. So now I know how to do very simple kinds of input and output, and that is our first Hello World type program, and it does some basic stuff that we're going to want to do in our programs. So that gives you an example of how to write a simple Python script, and this is the kind of file that you're going to turn in. So when you go to submit the assignment, you're going to drag and drop in this hello world.py, and that's going to be your assignment submission. Hopefully that makes sense to you. All right, so back to our list of topics. Last but not least, I want to just tell you a little bit about me. I know when you take a course and you have a brand new instructor, especially at part-time, when you sort of spin the wheel and you don't know what you're going to get. So hopefully I can convince you that I'm not a complete bozo and that you're going to have a good experience in this course. So here's my attempt to give you a little intro. First, in terms of schooling, I have my Bachelor of Science in Computer Science Business. That was from 1985 from UTEP. my hometown. And I also got my master's in software engineering in 1995 from Seattle University. Most of my technical career, though not all of it, was spent at Microsoft starting in 1991. It's a great company to work for. I enjoyed it. And my last position was as a senior lead software engineer. I had a team of 7, I think, at the end. Great folks. I had a great experience working at Microsoft. During my time there, I was focused mostly on software testing and tester education. In terms of programming, I took my first programming course when I was in, I think, 7th grade, but I can't say that I really understood the full implications of it at that point. But in high school, I really got interested as I started doing my own programming and found it useful for my own uses. So that's when I caught the bug. In terms of teaching, I've been teaching adults computer type topics since 1983 in either seminars or long courses or different kinds of formats. But my first grade teacher said that I was tutoring and teaching even then. There was a little girl named Maria who was having trouble reading, and I was determined to help her, tutor her along and help her to read better. So I guess teaching's in my blood. I've been doing it for an awful long time. In terms of fun stuff, I do have other hobbies. Music is probably the biggest one that's non-computer related. So I am a musician as well. And in terms of languages, I'm pretty fluent in Spanish, and I know smatterings of several other languages that I couldn't communicate fluently in, but at least I can understand some basics in. So that's a little bit about me, and I've also taught at North for a lot of years, off and on. So I've been teaching, programming courses, applications like Microsoft Outlook, Microsoft Excel. So teaching's great. I love doing it, and so I'm looking forward to working with you on this course. I'm excited to do this introductory programming course with you. Last but not least, that brings us to the end. Thanks to Barbara Goldner for providing some basic materials and some starter templates. And I look forward to working with you. Ask me questions in the forum or an email if you have them. Look forward again to the course, and we'll see you soon. Thanks.